down for this border of the soft palate and the hard palate. And you can usually, I don't necessarily need to feel it with my finger, but you can feel that little indentation right there. So usually it's about halfway the distance between the margin and the midline, somewhere in there, and you're going to feel for the little indentation. And it's usually somewhere between or in the area of the second or first molar apex, usually by the second molar. There's almost always pretty classically right by the second molar. You don't want to go too far back, because if you go too far back, you're just going to get her soft palate numb. That feels really weird to patients. They freak out. But also, it doesn't get the tooth numb, and you're just going to have to go back in and do it. So better to be a little more forward of where you need to be than too far back. And when in doubt with a GP, a lot of times you can see it blanching, and wherever any of these injections you do, no matter what you do, wherever it's blanching, that's where the anesthesia is, because it's got the epinephrine in it. So we may not see as much of that when we're using plain on each other, but when you're using it in patients, wherever it's blanching. So you've got your incisive papilla right here, correct? Now, for this one, my personal experience has been it doesn't necessarily matter which direction you come from, but if I'm going to get this right side numb, I want to be on the right side of the papilla. If I'm going to do the left side, I want to be the left side of the papilla. What tends to happen here is most people come at it almost like a little too perpendicular to the palate, and they hit bone really early, and you can't deposit for anything. It's way too tight. It's way more pressure than you think you're going to need. And then you're not getting any distribution of the anesthesia if you even can get any out, plus it's pretty painful. So if you, again, kind of be mindful of the way the palate works, I am going to insert to the side of that papilla, but I need to be sort of at an angle so that I'm down in that sort of fossa-y area, does that make the fascia, so that I can get the needle in there and I can distribute some anesthesia. If I go perpendicular to any bone, my needle's going to hit the bone and stop right there, and depending, I probably won't even be able to deposit because it's too tight of a space because your opening of your needles are so small. No anesthesia is going to distribute. Does that make sense at once? So I'm going to either use a explorer, or excuse me, a probe or something, and then, or a Q-tip. And then I like to use the Q-tip because then I can give it enough pressure that it blanches, right? So I'm going to blanch the papilla, and then I'm going to insert to the side of that papilla, okay? And then from there, you're going to talk about your dosages. You guys are going to talk about all those things that you've learned so far every time you do it. But in practice, you want to be mindful that if I see it blanching up really quickly, I may not need to do that much. If I don't see it blanching at all, I may need to do a little bit more. Does that make sense? So you're going to come up in here, and you're going to go from this angle. And then for this palatal, you're going to be a little bit more like this. Now, where students sort of get hung up, it seems like, is trying to figure out fulcruming. I don't really fulcrum because I will show you why. I'm just going to take this cardboard off. It's capped, okay? So I don't really fulcrum because once my needle's resting somewhere, that's going to hold me, okay? But some people are die-hard fulcrumers. If that's your case, what you have to be mindful of is you're not supposed to be here. This seems like a great way to deliver anesthesia, but it's not. You need to be back here. This is just balancing, okay? This is giving you pressure, and you need to have a nice light pressure in these knuckles, not all the way back in here. Because trust me, when you need to do a little bit more, you've got no way to retract, okay? You're going to need that down on the ring. But anyway, so if I'm like doing her GP, for example, I'm at this angle, and I'm going to try and skirt along there in the palate a little bit. This needle will bend a teeny bit while I do that, and that's okay as long as it's not bending a lot. Then for here, I'm going to come from this angle to go into that one. Does that make sense? Okay, then if I'm open or closed just a little, so if I'm going into my PSA, then I'm going to go in, up, and back. Okay, if I'm doing my MSA, I'm going to go along here. And if I'm doing my ASA, I'm going to go along here. And again, I don't fulcrum, I'm not shaky. If you're a little shaky and free,